The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to exploring the cutting edge of metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and the unexplained. 5,000 years of wisdom on demand. Get your first month for only 99 cents. Visit Gaia.com/Jim. That's Gaia.com/Jim to see what's happening on the largest consciousness media streaming platform in the world. Thanks, Gaia.
This is the Paranormal Podcast with Jim Harold.
Welcome to the Paranormal Podcast. I am Jim Harold and so glad to be with you. And this is, if you can hear the excitement in my voice, it's because there is legitimate excitement this week around UFO stories. Now, I have a little confession to make. Originally, we were going to do a Christmas special, but I thought what it could be a bigger gift rather than the traditional Christmas special to have a panel of some superstars and paranormal and supernatural and UFO thought with me to talk about this great UFO news, or very interesting UFO news from the New York Times this last weekend. And on the line we have Mr. Clayton Morris, Mr. Micah, and Mr. Ryan Sprague to talk about the big UFO news. Of course, the New York Times reporting the existence of a secret government project that may continue to this day, appears to continue to this day, and also talk about some sightings that have happened with some Navy pilots. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank
Merry
you so
Christmas.
much.
Merry Christmas to everybody. Well,
it's a Festivus miracle.
It is. It is. I have the Festivus poll right here, actually. Now it's going to be a little hard to do the feats of strength, though. That will be difficult. But
Yeah.
mental strength, except for me. Anyway, we'll start with Clayton. Clayton, these days you're doing the investment thing with Morris Invest, where you're the president and helping people grow their wealth and those kind of things. And we talked a little bit before we hit record, and you were in the mainstream media for years as a television host and so forth. And man, the mainstream media has reported all of this news in this last weekend, glowing auras and black money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program, and all of these different things. Unbelievable. It must be very interesting for you as a mainstream media guy.
Well, and we were talking before the show a little bit. I wish that this had happened while I was still, at Fox News Channel hosting. I was fortunate enough to host really the number one cable morning show in the world, and it would have been incredible. There was a time actually over the summer when we did a show where we talked about a sighting, and the viewers actually really sided with me in believing that we are not alone. We got just thousands and thousands of emails, and we spent about 10 minutes on the show talking about it, where one of my hosts says that she didn't believe in it. I said, how can you not think we're the only thing in the universe, right? The only thing in this dimension, crying out loud. So I just wish that this had happened while I was still on the air, but I am heartened to see that, well, look, the New York Times spent a long time working on this piece, we know, working with a former, Pentagon official, Luis Elizondo, and others to firm up the story, to really make it a robust piece. And even then, when the piece came out, a lot of the insiders who had come forward said, yep, they nailed it. They really did a great job with this piece, and I think really opened the floodgates for a lot of other people. Now you're seeing mainstream media, CNN last night, MSNBC last night, covering this story and getting interviews on there. In fact, Aaron Burnett on CNN had Luis Elizondo on the show on CNN's Out Front last night, which I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, I mean, this is incredible to me. Now, Micah, you've been in the trenches for years. I know UFOs are probably, I would say, kind of in a way, your thing. You love researching UFOs and talking about historic cases. And when I think about media reports, I think about Life magazine in the 50s and those kind of things. But this has got to be right up there. I mean, my goodness, to have two big stories come out on the New York Times and all the subsequent coverage. Micah, what is your take on this?
Well, I mean, it is truly extraordinary. I mean, some are even putting out those all-hallowed terms like disclosure, or at very least the subsidiary soft disclosure. I don't know if I can step all the way into that ring yet, but I will just share a quote from this morning's Times Insider, where they were giving a little behind-the-scenes information about the big reveal that occurred over on NewYorkTimes.com on Saturday, and then, of course, which appeared in print the following day. And Ralph Blumenthal, writing this morning for Times Insider, said, and I quote, "It was important that we not take anything on faith. This field attracts zealots as well as debunkers, and many Americans remain deeply skeptical that the phenomena exists as popularly portrayed. But I don't think that we can doubt that a number of people think that there is indeed some kind of a phenomena." So, yeah, for me, and I know I'm mirroring some of the sentiments that are going to be shared by the panelists here, this was significant because of the fact that the media was discussing it, and it did not have this traditional kind of, we're going to downplay this and marginalize this as pure craziness, which I got to give props to my man Clayton here. Every time he would address these things on Fox News, it was always from a very conscientious and a very serious approach. It's unfortunate that these days something that, again, could be referred to as advanced aerospace threat identification by the Pentagon and other agencies, that this would not be treated as such. And so I do commend Clayton for doing that in a popular format before a large audience. I wish that more people could. This weekend, we finally saw that kind of thing happening en masse.
Yeah.
Thanks, Micah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So we got to get Brian Sprague in here somewhere in the skies. You're one of the young researchers, and I think one of the great young researchers in UFOs. You bring our average age down quite a bit on the panel. But I got to get your perspective on this. I mean, is this just a rehash of old news, or is this really exciting? I heard some people on Twitter saying, well, there's really nothing new here. I mean, we know that the government's been researching UFOs, and I disagree with that assertion. But what are your thoughts about what happened this last weekend?
Well, that's a really good point, Jim. I think what this story in particular conveys is that for the mainstream, for the people who don't think about this on a daily basis like a lot of us do, of course it's not a surprise that some sort of governmental body has been investigating UFOs. But what I think is most surprising is that this was so recent. A lot of us we always like to go to Project Blue Book, Grudge, all of these projects that happened in the 40s, 50s, 60s. But this is 2007 to 2012. For anyone out there who is not following UFO coverage, this is a stunning revelation, I would assume. So it was very exciting. I had no idea that this was going on. We all have these assumptions that the government is doing this, but to finally hear it on mainstream media, again, from every news outlet, Clayton, I remember watching your interview with Obama's pilot, and that the seriousness that is being done in the mainstream with this story. And I do feel, again, Clayton, that you sort of paved the way for that in many ways, is that people are taking this seriously. There's very little ridicule factor happening with this story. It's spreading like wildfire. And we know this is not the end of it. We're going to be getting more video footage. We're going to get more articles. And this could be a major snowball effect. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
Now, I hope this whets the appetite, don't you guys? I mean, I feel like, I don't know why, to me, this is the greatest story of all time, right? In the mainstream media, what more could you ask for than on a Sunday night 60 Minutes episode?
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
And I think even we are downplaying. By we, I mean those who are interested in UFOs and have followed this for years. We're really not delving into this and looking line by line. I'm going to read a paragraph from the original story. Now, the Bigelow that I will refer to is the Mr. Bigelow, who owns Bigelow Aerospace. Bigelow was a friend of Nevada Senator Harry Reid, who helped make this happen. But listen to this. Under Mr. Bigelow's direction, the company modified buildings in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo and program contractors said had been recovered from unidentified aerial phenomena. Researchers also studied people who they had said experienced physical effects from encounters with the objects and examined them for physiological changes. In addition, researchers spoke to military service members who had reported sightings of strange aircraft. But again, the key sentence to me right there, for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo and program contractors said have been recovered from unidentified aerial phenomena. There it is. It's been recovered. This story is saying that it has been recovered. That, to me, is the biggest smoking gun in the whole story.
Well, and materials that are not from this world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, what more? It's right there. You're right, Jim. Like it's in print in the New York Times.
Exactly.
What do you
Clayton,
think?
That's a good point.
What do you think, Micah?
I wanted to
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. I wanted to add also, we did refer to Bigelow in that 60 Minutes interview, saying, he was absolutely convinced that aliens exist and the UFOs have visited Earth. Now, if Harry Reid is working with Bigelow, if a lot of this money that this secret program was funneled towards Bigelow, you have to wonder, what does Bigelow actually know? So, yeah, I'll throw it over to you there, Micah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much that needs to be discussed. This may be the most interesting thing to me about this. I tend to look at things sociologically, and with this story, rather than many skeptics looking at this, now again, I maintain a pretty skeptical disposition myself, and I'm not quick to jump into the therefore aliens camp. And as Leslie Kean, I think, very eloquently 2 nights ago put it during one of her television news appearances, she says, nobody's saying we're studying aliens here. We are studying a phenomena, whatever that phenomena may yet yield to be and what information we may glean from that. But there are strong insinuations that there is something, yes, as we have said, of perhaps foreign origin here. But sociologically looking at this, many skeptics, rather than looking at this and saying, okay, perhaps we can take a different approach now. Maybe now we are finally moving toward getting to a point where there is certain acknowledgement of information. There may be material substances that perhaps in the coming months, this will be something that can be studied more broadly, and we can come to something of a scientific consensus on what this phenomena entails, which is something that the UFO community up until this point has been lacking. Instead of that kind of an attitude, what I'm seeing many people say is UFO nut Robert Bigelow, to quote one skeptic who went to Twitter about this. They go right into the marginalization and using the ad hominem attacks because they have fundamentally already made up their minds. There are no such things as unidentified flying objects as stated by the UFO community. If there is anything to us, to any of this, in fact, it is far less than what we presume that it probably is. And therefore, let's go right to the heart of the issue, which to them, and this is so interesting, has to do with the allocation of $22 million or so to Bob Bigelow, which he used to subcontract groups like MUFON and others to aid in investigating something at the direction of Harry Reid. Everybody, again, I saw National Review commenting on this, and of course they go straight to politics and say, "Can you believe Harry Reid took $22 million and put that kind of money into this?" So people are getting so hung up in the political hubris. Sure, we need congressional oversight, although I think I can understand why Reid and the other 2 senators involved did not want a Senate floor hearing about this, and it was referred to as black budget, probably because they knew it would have been struck down and they felt it was important enough. Now, again, whether or not you endorse that, I'm saying I understand why they did it. But the big problem we see here is that those getting caught up in the political hubris are missing the fundamental point, and one that, yes, may prove to be revelatory. There does seem to, at very least, and let's be as conservative as we can here, at very least there seems to be acknowledgement of some technology and a phenomena that is rooted in said technology, and that we can't account for it nor attribute it to any known country of origin.
I would say this, to your point, just from a national security perspective. Now people say, well, there aren't such things as UFOs. It's all imagination. What about the gun camera footage that was shown also by the Times this weekend? 2 Navy airmen seeing that they saw an object and got it on gun camera footage that accelerated like nothing they'd ever seen. I mean, to me, from a national security perspective, if you have something flying off the coast of the United States and your pilots don't know what it is and you don't know what it is, and it can totally evade your radar and it can outrun F-18s, to me, that's worth the relatively small investment of $22 million, which is probably what like the bolts in an F-35 cost.
Right. I mean, if you talk about the amount of money, you're absolutely right. Think about the amount of money that gets thrown around in Washington for protecting, our national security with a $600 billion defense budget.
Yep.
$22 million, I could cough, and that's already been spent. The amount that's being talked about for a border wall, is in the billions of dollars. So $22 million is a ridiculous sum of money to be talking about and worried about politically. Although I will say, having spoken to Leslie Kean a few months ago, one of the things she and I talked about was this idea that this is exactly the type of program we should be investing in this country. And other countries are pretty open about investigating these type of phenomenon. right? Peru and other countries, Israel, right? And Iran has programs that look into unexplained aerial phenomenon. I'm actually heartened when, one of the things that Elizondo said was, look, we believe that this is still going on. This idea of 2012, I think, is probably the biggest canard in the entire piece.
Yeah, he says he has a successor. He won't name who that person is. So thus, maybe it's funded from a different bucket of money, but it's still there.
Right. Yeah, and keep in mind that again, Blumenthal, writing for the Times Insider this morning, said our conclusion was that this program, whatever it is, in some form, without the funding that it once had, is still continuing. Guys, again, let me talk about Stanton Friedman for just a moment. He has long said that he thinks that there is some sort of a UFO study group. He has said this for years. He says somebody continues to study this. This has been the case probably for decades. John Alexander, of course, wrote a great book on UFOs that took a kind of a borderline skeptical kind of an attitude in itself. And one of the issues he had was, he said, after talking with people in government, I could not find any evidence of the said government UFO investigative group, and yet here now it comes to light that there was one. What this says a lot about to me at least, is that need to know certainly comes into question here. If someone in a division of government does not have a need to know for one project or another, and keep in mind that a lot of the information that Leslie Kean was able to review involved unclassified documents, it may not be always the case that people in the know are necessarily in the know and have the requisite need to know in order to find out about these kind of things. So we're finding about this in a very different kind of way than we probably long expected that we would. And sure, I guarantee that if anything, this may be one of a few government projects in different divisions that look at the UFO problem. I'm sure that there's probably other stuff we haven't even heard about.
Absolutely, Micah. And again, that aviation threat thing keeps coming to mind to me, is that no government body is going to investigate UFOs unless there is some sort of threat. And I think that's what's really interesting about this, is these unclassified or declassified documents that we're going to be getting. Clearly, whatever the Pentagon was studying, it is no longer perceived to be a threat. Again, this is probably still ongoing. Like you gentlemen said, it's probably in some sort of private sector at this point. But interesting nonetheless. This gun camera footage, what I found most compelling is the audio, not even the visual of this, is how scared these pilots were. When we think of when pilots are seeing or reporting UFOs, their instruments malfunction, the radar doesn't pick up. Exciting, but we always think that they're controlled and that they're doing their job. But these pilots were terrified. I mean, the expletives that were coming out of their mouths, It was a little scary. So there had to be some sort of threat there, even though this is, declassified at this point. Whatever those pilots saw, they could not identify, and they had to have felt some potential threat.
One of the commanders, David Fravor, told CNN, he said, looked like what he saw in 2004, presumably near San Diego, was like a 40-foot long tic-tac shape that, maneuvered rapidly, changes direction during flight. And of course, you see in that audio, to your point, Ryan, these pilots saying, one guy saying, "Oh, it looks like a drone." He's like, "But it's going 120 knots against the wind, and look at it now; it's completely changing. Nothing we've known can do that." I have to say, like, in this community, it seems like among us and others, there's more trepidation on our part to come out and just say, "Yep, it's UFOs. Yep, it's UFOs." It seems like we've been more cautious, slow, deliberate than even perhaps the mainstream media has been in this time, which is actually pretty interesting to watch. It's like being an Eagles fan. Everyone's like, "Hey, your Eagles looks like they're going to the Super Bowl." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm from Philadelphia. Look, we just take one thing. I don't know." And then, of course, Carson Wentz gets good.
Hey, don't talk to me about Carson Wentz. The Browns passed him up, traded. Don't even get me in this right there.
But I think that's like as an Eagles fan, it's kind of like the UFO community. It's like, oh, we've seen some of this before. How is this going to be received? But I have to say, I think this is validation and vindication for someone like Tom DeLonge, who a lot of people are like, hey, when is this information? Obviously, a former of Blink 182, and he had been really spearheading this research group. People are like, when is this report going to come out? You keep talking about this big news, and it was the New York Times piece that kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed for further research. They didn't want to come out with something something that was going to be laughed at. They wanted it shored up, multiple sourced from inside the government, and I think they nailed it. And so vindication for folks like Tom DeLonge and others who had been working on this for a while.
Well, you kind of jumped my one of my future questions here is that, I mean, why did this come out now? Was it Tom DeLonge? And I'm going to throw something out there, and I don't want everybody's heads to explode, but we have a different administration in the White House now, with, as much as you may dislike the present occupant, a different way of thinking. I think that's accurate. Do you think that maybe somebody in the administration is pushing for this? Is there someone, the CIA? I mean, did somebody say, psst, psst, look at this, look at this? I mean, what do you think is kind of the burr in the saddle that caused this? Because the truth is, I can't recall us ever seeing anything like this, certainly since I've been following this subject. So what was the irritant here that caused this to come out now? What do you think?
If I could speak to that point really quickly, we addressed this last night on the Grayling Report too, because I think that while many people are getting kind of hung up in the politics and in the budgets and all of the appropriations and the subcontracting and everything that went on, and they're completely ignoring the fact that there is very credible discussion of what may be very credible evidence, maybe the most we've seen in a long time, for the existence of said phenomena and its technological origin. Let's not forget about the UFOs, ladies and gents, but on the political side of things, if we look at what was going on toward the end of the last campaign season, at the end of 2016, actually in the middle of 2016, it was a very contentious election, and it was very telling.
What are you talking about?
Really?
It was very telling to me that in the middle of such a contentious election season, that Hillary Clinton's campaign manager would be meeting with Tom DeLonge, and apparently it was revealed in high likelihood that Major General William McCaslin, who oversees the Science Division at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and oversees around 11,000 U.S. Air Force Science Division employees, he was coming with DeLonge to meet with Clinton's campaign manager. Now, that is quite revelatory. I mean, if it had happened at any other time, that's one thing, but during an election season strongly insinuates the notion that they were hoping, and they were banking, in fact, on the new administration being probably Clinton, and that they were going to try and coordinate with that administration, knowing Clinton's affinity for the UFO subject, and before her husband as well. So, again, it doesn't get into political preferences here. I'm just talking about the reality of the fact that that's probably why Podesta was involved and why Tom DeLonge was working with him. But again, for those who have tried to naysay Tom DeLonge, and I have been cautiously skeptical myself, and let's just face it, I think when he went on his Joe Rogan appearance recently, there was a good case to be made that Tom, he's a bit of a dreamer when it comes to the UFO thing, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that I think he's so anxious to get this information out there. And maybe he doesn't have the kind of reserve, or like, Clayton was talking about, many in the community, we've been more cautious even than the media. Well, I think that perhaps we could say the same of Tom DeLonge, that we've been a little more conscientious about the way that we approach this subject than Tom has. But he has nonetheless managed to get the right people around him. And so what we saw happen this weekend, although I think that initially it would have happened sooner had there been a different administration, that they were probably trying to coordinate with them, I also think that nonetheless it has happened anyway, and that by having the right kind of people around him, Tom DeLonge has, maybe been vindicated somewhat, because you cannot say that the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences had not played a role in this. Luis Elizondo is a part of that. Hal Puthoff is a part of that. And Tom, his name has come up, and he has said very little since the media broke the story over the weekend. Of course, first appearing in New York Times, but Politico's carried information about this, the WashPo. I mean, so many news sources now. And keep in mind, he says this is one of around 20 disclosures that we have forthcoming. So what else have they got?
That's true. Well, what are your guys, Ryan and Clayton, what are your thoughts about what spurred this on at this particular time?
Ryan, you want to take that? I have some ideas.
Yeah, absolutely, Clayton. I mean, I'm kind of with Micah on this, with Luis Elizondo being connected to Tom DeLonge and the huge list of people that Tom is working with. I was the same way at first when, I listened to Blink-182, being the younger ufologist, Jim. Blink-182
I
was
never heard of those guys.
They were my childhood. So when I heard that Tom was so into this, of course I was excited. The more and more this happened and the more Tom was dragging his feet, I kind of lost interest. But when To the Stars, was announced earlier this October, I believe it was, I was pretty excited. The only problem I have is that Tom has shot himself in the foot time and time again. On social media, he has posted well-known hoaxed photos of triangular UFOs with no context whatsoever, no sources, nothing, absolutely nothing. He's done the day before this New York Times article came out, he tweeted out that, oh, all of you people who doubt me, you're idiots, this, that, blah, blah, blah. The ego on this man is clear. It's palpable. Maybe it's because he was a rock star, but it's very interesting, the motivation behind what Tom is trying to do and the connection to this article. Leslie Kean also, I mean, we know that she has some insider info with Tom in terms of releasing this information. So you have to wonder this circle of people.
Yeah, I thought about that, about her being one of the authors. And by the way, I respect her greatly. Her 2010 book about UFOs in general is fantastic. It's right there on my shelf. Clayton's interviewed her. I've interviewed her. I think she's great, but I do think that's a very interesting loop that should be noticed, and good on you on picking it up.
I guess so. And again, we've already said it today, is the question is why? Why now? I don't have an answer for that. 2018 is going to be very interesting as we get more gun camera footage, more stuff coming from To the Stars Academy, and hopefully from more mainstream news outlets. What do you think, Clayton?
Yeah, I think with all the Wikipedia, with the WikiLeaks information, I know one of Tom's thoughts is that it would really derail the conversation, that what he was working on was going to be completely derailed. But it seems like everything stayed on track, and he was surprised by that, that people would sort of go into hiding. If anything, I think it emboldened. I think if you're looking for that irritant, Jim,
that's exactly right. Here's what I think about DeLong. Is he a perfect vessel? Probably not. But if you look at the UFO, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Clayton, but I want to get this point across. A few years ago, I went to a UFO meeting here in Cleveland, and there was a great speaker, and I think we all know the guy I'm thinking of. I'm not going to mention him, but a respected UFO investigator, great guy. And I was at the Cleveland UFO group, or whatever it's called. And the average age there, I mean, at that time I was right around 40, and I pulled down the average age by about 30 years. Because most of the people, God bless them, were over the age of 65. I mean, if this is something we're going to continue to investigate, there have to be younger people like Ryan. There has to be a new wave of attention. And to Tom DeLong, is he a perfect vessel? I doubt it very seriously, and he has his flaws, and Ryan is right. If he's done things like this on social media, that's a good thing to point out. But I think he's done a great service in getting attention to this subject. Go ahead, Clayton.
No, I agree. And I think I think what happened was it made a lot of people pay attention in a way that maybe that we wouldn't have before. I bet you Tom probably had additional sources that emerged as a result of WikiLeaks. Instead of doing it behind closed doors in the way that it was, because it's got forced out there. And people were saying, wait a second, there's members of the administration, could be potential administration are having discussions with, about UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomenon. And Hillary Clinton is going on the Jimmy Kimmel show and talking about this. And, John Podesta, conversations back and forth. And, I frankly had conversations with John Podesta, in the hallways of Fox News about this. And so, and literally a week before WikiLeaks happened. And so I thought for sure that maybe my name would come out in the whole thing. And
and we know you're Skype calling Julian Assange in the embassy there.
But, I think if anything, I think it helped because Tom didn't lose his sources, the people that were currently coming forward to work with him, so he says. And I think it maybe emboldened some other people to reach out and go on the record about what they knew and what programs existed. And I think the other things the other shoes that are about to drop that you talked about, I know that we are going to see a bunch of other videos coming out very soon from the military, a lot of other military videos that are apparently about to hit the airwaves. So we have not seen the last of these gun camera footage pieces that are about to hit.
Hey, Clayton, to that point, I also add, look at some of the social phenomena that occurs as it results from social media these days. For instance, the hashtag #MeToo campaign in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein allegations. When we see mass coverage, and of course, with the dissemination of information these days, the ability for that information to reach so many different locations and a much wider audience, different demographics, age groups, et cetera, you can't help but wonder if something like what happened this past weekend could not have the same effect with the context of UFOs in mind.
Right.
But in equal measure, we might also say that if that is the case on a social level, could it not also encourage some people in officialdom to come forward and say, look, it is time that we acknowledge first and foremost that this is something that should be discussed and something that should be studied. And if we did it through black budget funding the first time around and kept it really hush-hush, well, we've spilled the beans now, how do the people feel about it? Why don't we make this, for, by, and of the people? Let's put this information to them and let's see how people feel about serious study of this kind of a thing before we go and say, I can't believe you'd waste $22 million in taxpayer money. This is the people's money. Well, how do the people feel about it? Polls continue to show that there is a great interest in this phenomena. And again, like Blumenthal said this morning, it may not be exactly how it's been popularly portrayed, but that doesn't mean that there is no phenomena at all. And so again, we really do, I think, owe it to ourselves to ask some very, significant intellectual questions about, is this something that should be studied, whether for our benefit or as a threat assessment? And how do the American people feel about that? That's today what really should be the most important. And I know that I feel strongly about it, and plenty of other people do. Whether or not it's aliens, I don't care what it is. We need to understand and discern that, and then move forward.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jim, but to Micah, to your point, Luis Elizondo, the question was about threats. To your point, he said we discovered a lot of them. The question is, well, did the program, was it successful? Did we identify threats? Yeah, his answer, yes, we identified a lot of them. And him coming forward and resigning in protest over the fact that he thought that this program should come to light. And then a week later, he joins Tom DeLonge's group to get this message out there. And guess what? Now other people, to your point, may start coming forward and saying, okay, it starts with these individuals, people like Salma Hayek in Hollywood, who she said she was sad that she sort of sat back and watched these other people come forward about Harvey Weinstein, right? Mm-hmm. She wishes that she would have been more vocal. Well, how many people in government have been a part of these programs at the highest level who may also be having trouble sleeping at night and want, turn to their wife, or the wife turns to the husband and says, you know what, I've got to make a decision tomorrow. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. So it's going to happen.
Well, it is time that we raise the taboo on this and quit treating it like a silly subject. Again, that is, I think, something that is so important. And I'm sorry, Jim, one more point really quickly. It's your program. I don't mean to run my mouth the entire time, but then again, my nickname. So
that's that's why I had you on the panel.
Well, thank you, brother. It's always a pleasure to be here with all you guys, by the way. But the other point, too, Robert Schaefer from The Skeptical Perspective, and somebody who I've corresponded with, talked with, a good skeptic blogger, in my opinion. And yeah, he's a little hard on the subject sometimes, but we need people like Bob who'll do that. And Bob said, To the Stars said they had 3 videos. They released 2. Where's the other one? Hey, great question. Now, here is some speculation. Could it be that one of the videos that is forthcoming but has yet to be released has been withheld for a particular reason? We put 2 of them out, we get some media coverage, but we don't, begin with our final sanction. We don't put all our cards on the table all at once. I speculate that perhaps To the Stars, those involved with Tom DeLonge and Tom DeLonge himself, are perhaps going about this in a rather measured way, and we can maybe even expect more information with the knowledge that some of it has been withheld from the outset.
And I think that makes great sense. It was strategically, from a press relations standpoint, and trying to get the story, you want to prolong the story, and you want to have punch after punch after punch. You want to hit it time after time, rather than just saying, here's everything. I think that makes all the sense in the world. The other thing that makes all the sense in the world? We're going to take this break, and we'll be back with Clayton Morris, Micah Hanks, Ryan Sprague, and yours truly on the Paranormal Podcast, talking about UFOs, the New York Times, and maybe disclosure right after this. The Paranormal Podcast is brought to you by Gaia, the streaming TV service dedicated to exploring the cutting edge of metaphysics, ancient wisdom, and the unexplained. And I am sure that some of you within the next week or so, we'll find some streaming devices in your stocking if you've been good boys and girls. And I know I can see out there you have been. And that's very exciting because I love tech. I love new devices. That's fantastic. But ultimately, those devices are useless unless you have great stuff to access with them. Now, thank you for listening to this show and accessing this show. But where do you go when you want to access the best video in the supernatural, paranormal, Fortean ancient mysteries realm? Well, there's only one answer. That answer is Gaia. And I have good news because you're going to be able to watch Gaia on all of those devices. You're going to get your Apple TV, your Roku, your iPhone, your Android phone, your iPad, your Chromecast, your Android tablet, your Fire TV, your computer. If you're listening to me, you're going to be able to watch Gaia on that beautiful new device. Now, I have some good news because Gaia is playing Santa this holiday season, and they have their Friends Watch Free promotion. And I'm going to give you a very interesting show that you'll be able to watch for absolutely free, no cost whatsoever, no catch. The only thing is that the first person that clicks play starts a 48-hour clock. So as soon as you hear this, and hopefully you'll hear this within the first couple of days of it being released around the 19th or 20th of December, I hope that you click on this so you can see it. It's going to be an episode of Open Minds hosted by Regina Meredith. And this is going to be from season 9, episode 16, Past Life Relationships with Georgina Cannon. If you know me, I'm fascinated by the afterlife and the idea of reincarnation. And Georgina uses past life regressions to help her clients find a deeper meaning to their current life by understanding their past and interlife relationships. Ultimately, her work helps you to understand your values and what is important to you at the soul level. And that's the way that she looks at it. And you can find about it by going to this link, gaia.com/watchfree/57. That's gaia.com/watchfree/57. And you don't want to wait on this because you need to do this right away. gaia.com/watchfree/57. That'll give you a taste of the high quality content that Gaia gives you, whether it's like this program produced by Gaia and they do a ton of great original content, or some of the third-party productions they bring in that they have vetted and they have curated and said this is high quality stuff, and they only bring in the highest of quality of programming over at Gaia. There's so much great content, and once you've watched that video, I have another favor to ask of you. Go to gaia.com/Jim. That's gaia.com/Jim. And there's going to be a button that says sign up, and you can get your first month for 99 cents. Only 99 cents. And I think that's a gift that you should give yourself immediately. I think you're going to enjoy it because Gaia is great, and they are the largest consciousness media streaming platform in the world. So you're going to want to go to gaia.com/Jim to experience all of that great content. Only 99 cents for your first month. Happy holidays, everybody, and thanks, Gaia. We are back on the Paranormal Podcast. My guests today are Clayton Morris, Micah Hanks, Ryan Sprague, and we are talking about the huge UFO revelations that were released by the New York Times over the weekend, gun camera footage. My goodness, well, I think the biggest story in the 12 years since I've been doing this show, and I think it's fascinating. We're so glad these gentlemen decided to join us today in the thick of the holiday season, and what a gift it is for people interested in UFOs. Now, here is a question for all of you. Now, there's different schools of thoughts on UFOs. There's the school of thought that there's nothing to it, and it's just a bunch of crazy people and hoaxers. And I think we can all say safely that we disagree with that. Then there's people that think, well, the government kind of knows what's going on. They're having research programs. They're not sure what's going on. And I think if you follow the news of this last weekend, that's where people would fall. It's like, well, they know something's going on. They're investigating it. They don't want to let us know, but they know something's going on. And then there's people say, this is old news. Of course there's something going on. Eisenhower saw the bodies, Wright Patterson. Roswell, that we may even be in league with the aliens. Aliens have been here. They're in contact with certain individuals. And all of this is a huge smokescreen. Where do you guys fall on that continuum?
I'll jump in here, Jim, if I could. I think the thing that we're discussing a lot on today's conversation is that this is more about the technology that the New York Times has reported, that Luis has reported. It's inventory of a foreign inventory is what Luis said, that appeared to defy the laws of aerodynamics. Now, this we know is what To the Stars is trying to accomplish. It's aerospace. They're trying to use whatever technology that they are gleaning, I think, from these videos, and possibly hardware that Bigelow may have. We don't know for sure. To create some sort of craft. And I think that's what's really interesting is in all of this coverage in the mainstream media, there's very little talk, except maybe for the anchors pushing it, about alien or extraterrestrial. I think they're being very strategic, very careful. And this is about the technology, which I find very interesting. There's been very little talk about what the UFOs are, who is piloting them. It's about what maneuvers they're making. And this is all another big point, I think, is that military. We've been told that the military is working with Tom to try to almost show how exciting it can be to work with the military on technology like this. So I find that very interesting as well. Is Tom some sort of recruitment tool? I don't know. That might be going a little too far. But I think it's really interesting that there has been little talk about actual aliens or little green men with all this, which I think is sobering, but actually very responsible.
Right. I think it does come down to the idea of this being a threat. And I think couched in the idea, I think this is also helpful for maybe us more of a blanket disclosure. If we step back and just look at this from a budgetary perspective and a moving the public opinion perspective, it is easy to sell the idea of protection in this country. Look at the size of our budgets, right? Look at the $600 billion a year for a defense budget. We never had a standing military. It's something that Eisenhower warned us about, right? As he was leaving office, like, hey, we never really had a standing military like this. So beware the military industrial complex. I see it happening. I see it unfolding. Now, every year they have these big conventions where everyone shows off their arms and their gas masks and all these things, and generals walk up and down the aisles and say, oh, let's take a look at this bit of hardware. And sure, well, maybe we'll sign a contract here. So it is a very lucrative business. And not that I'm looking for the government to spend a lot more money, but I think couched as national security is a smart way for us to begin to have this dialogue. And this administration, and any administration, quite frankly, is not afraid to shy away from discussing things around national security. Look, North Korea is a threat to us. We need to build up and shore up our Pacific fleet in order to protect ourselves against North Korea and aggression in the in the Korean Peninsula. So having it couched around national security, I think, I hate to say it because I don't want us to spend more money than we already do, but maybe moves us closer to a full blanket disclosure.
Another question too is when we're looking at like what could be going on here, one of the discussions that also comes up is, and as you guys mentioned right there at the outset of the program, the insinuation that certain material has been collected, perhaps by Bigelow Aerospace and others, and that we have in our possession things which appear to be remnants of or acquired bits of this technology, perhaps an entire crash retrieval or something like that. There have been, of course, in the annals of ufology, there have been legends about these things. And again, not maybe more than just legends in some instances, but surely I think some of these things also are more relegated to the area of myth than fact. But if we do have anything like that at our disposal, the fundamental question is, where does it come from? And I mean, there are a lot of hypothetical realities that should be considered here. And a lot of people are saying, hey, extraterrestrial is most likely, because I mean, again, there couldn't be anything here on Earth that would account for this. And again, my friend and colleague Richard Dolan is one of the very people who proposed this concept of a breakaway civilization. But sitting and talking with him at dinner in London a couple of years ago, he was saying, it's obvious you've thought an awful lot about this, Micah. And I got the distinct impression, and he told me as such, I don't really give myself to that idea, though. It's just kind of a theory I threw out there. And I am in equal measure hesitant to jump onto any existing theory. Is the military behind all of this? I don't think that's the case. Are they perhaps behind some of it? Yeah, I think they could be. Is this completely an alien phenomenon? Yeah, sure, could be. Could it be something else? And again, this idea of, and this goes more into the realm of conspiracy than anything else, but this idea of like a multinational, organization, or perhaps an extra governmental organization altogether that operates on the periphery of humankind, which again, effectively is that breakaway civilization that Dolan first put forward. That idea has managed to gain a lot of traction over the last few years, but should we rule that out entirely as being a potential source behind some of this technology? Maybe not. And, one of the funny points that I've made about this in the past is that if you want to see how a funding mechanism for this could come about, and again, it was Richard Dolan himself who said, I just don't see how something outside of government could possibly be funded in that capacity to account for the advancements that we're seeing with this technology. But if you watch the old program Breaking Bad, I'm sure most of us have watched it, you remember the character, the villain, Gus, and how Gus, of course, is funding this multinational effort, basically with production of very high-quality drugs and doing so very secretly and very quietly. Although that's fiction, and very firmly so, again, maybe there are at very least ideas that are forthcoming from discussions represented in popular fiction like that could account for certain things. And I don't think it's impossible that however we look at this, whether something came here and somebody acquired some of it, and then maybe somebody shelved this but kept it off the records, at least as far as world governments go. However you want to look at this, I don't rule out some of those potentials, and I think that it's probably a very multifaceted phenomena that we're dealing with today. Maybe some government fingers are in this pot. Maybe there's something else going on, and sure, maybe some of it's not earthly at all. But again, there are a lot of varieties of potentials that need to be considered here as it relates to this, and what role government may be playing in that, if any.
I wanted to check with Clayton on his thoughts on this because he's uniquely positioned to answer this question. The one fear that I have, as much as we're excited and as great as this is that the New York Times has decided to cover this last weekend, the news cycle. I remember growing up, crack babies were the big thing, the big concern of everybody. And every year there comes a new concern, like here's a tragedy, and it was a tragedy, no question, but we have to take care of this, or now it's opioids. In other words, it's kind of a cause celeb in the media, and then we forget about it. And the thing is that with something like this, especially with many people being hostile to this idea, could it be that just almost the timing of this being in the middle of the holiday season while people are doing other things, and that this will be quickly forgotten, and we as UFO aficionados are getting a little too excited about it because next week the Times and everybody else will be on to the next story, and so on and so on and so forth.
It's hard to say. I hope not. I hope that, and the sort of, Michael, to your point about, when are we going to see more of these videos as they start to trickle out? Are they going to do it WikiLeaks style, where it's not all at once, but we get this trickle of information? Let's be honest. If you dump it all at once, a lot gets lost in a huge information dump. And that's why people do these big document dumps on a Friday night in Washington. So, right. Trickling this information out in a way that lets us digest it and then propel the conversation forward, and it keeps that iron in the fire, so to speak. I hope that that's what they're planning to do. Look, we live in a media age, and we're all clamoring for a slice of attention. So if that can happen, that would be great. My fear is, though, that, Jim, you're right, is because we're such short attention span theater, we have this tax bill, right, which is going through. And what does that mean? Most people, obviously, and rightly so, are concerned with their wallets and their own immediate family, and how is this going to affect my ability to get, health care? 13 million people may be affected under that. So how can I get, my medicine for diabetes and all of these pieces? And aliens, UFOs? Okay, that's so out there. It has nothing to do with my family. And I even heard that among my co-hosts. It's like, one person said to me, she said, I have more important things to worry about, like my family, than this. And I thought, okay, yes, but that's an incredibly myopic way of looking at the universe. That's an incredibly myopic way of seeing what what potentially this could mean for civilization, just to say I'm just concerned with my own family. Do you get to live in a vacuum? Do you get to live in a walled world?
The aliens won't bother
interact?
her. No, I'm just kidding.
Right. So I don't know. My fear is though that this gets pushed to the side, but I think if we're going to see, it really comes down to journalists now. Let's be honest. I mean, it really comes down to questions that you get from the podium during the press briefings at the White House. Will the press start to push, Sarah Huckabee Sanders for answers? Will they start to press James Mattis, at the Pentagon? Will we start to get answers, or will this sort of be waved away as something we can't talk about? That's when things will really start to change. Once we get official government on the record responses about these things. Will the Sunday morning shows spend time really diving into this and talking about it and pushing? But, everyone's out of Washington during the holidays. They leave, and that's when news dries to a drip. So we'll see.
Yeah, the one good thing about that very quickly is that although we could certainly lose momentum, it's already been indicated by Tom DeLonge and To the Stars that they intend to release more information. We now know who the key players are in relation to the release of that kind of data. We saw the media reaction to it and the vetting that went through, or the process of vetting that the New York Times and others went through. So the response initially was good. If more information is forthcoming, it may not have the same impact that this first one did, but there may be a long and perhaps fruitful dialogue that has begun and hopefully will continue into the new year, at very least.
Amazing, I must say, I have a Google News alerts set up, so I get a morning daily digest that comes into my inbox, and most of the time it's nothing. There's a grapefruit that looks like something found in somebody's closet or something. It's just fun stuff, and occasionally you get a little nugget. This thing is spotted over Texas, and that's great. But then the other day when that Google News alert hit, I thought, my gosh, something's changed. Everyone, just filled with stories. I said, wow, here we go.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I as we're closer to the end of the show than the beginning, I'm going to throw a major bomb in the middle of the conversation. So we have to be careful how we navigate this.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So here comes. Now, I kind of hinted at this before, but I'm going to go right at it. President Trump. Now, I know there's some people have strong opinions about Trump. And the one thing that I think that can be said that's accurate about him is, I think the term loose cannon is fair to say. In other words, Trump, whether you're a fan or you can't stand the sight of the man, is more likely to do something that a typical president wouldn't do. I think that's a fair statement. So he might come out and insult an entertainer on Twitter, which no president in my memory would ever do. Even pre-Twitter, they wouldn't have sent a release saying Rosie O'Donnell is a pig or something like that. And obviously, that to me, that's completely non-presidential and beyond the dignity of the office and should not be done. But that being said, Trump doesn't seem to have a filter. Do you think it's ever possible? Let's say the government is sitting on a lot of big secrets to the extent of like, yeah, we know about him. We're in communication with him. Or, yeah, we know about him. We don't really know what to do about it, but we know about him. Trump is the kind of guy, it strikes me, that if there was ever going to be a president just said, screw it, I'm going to tell everybody what's going on, that he would be the one to do it. Do you think that's within the realm of potentially happening?
And take credit for it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest,
I'm the first president. But go ahead.
Absolutely. Right. That ego to this presidency, I think, could make that happen. But I think we also have to keep in mind, what certain presidents have known throughout the years in terms of this subject. Some a lot more than others. And we all know they're only there for 8 years maximum. They're not going to tell them all the UFO secrets, but I find it interesting that we got the JFK file release recently that Trump took credit for.
But kind of, sort of, though.
But to your point, Ryan, because then he came out and said, there was like 200 or 300 pages that we couldn't because of national security.
Yeah.
Right. So some of it was withheld because of that very reason, and that's just the JFK assassination. I mean, talk about UFO disclosure? What would be held back because of national security?
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that he has not chimed in yet on this story. I know he's got a lot on his plate already that he's dealing with right now, but I think maybe who knows what we'll see as 2018 creeps forward in terms of what Trump will have to say about this. That loose cannon aspect, Jim, both terrifies me and actually intrigues me. Will he try to make himself a part of this narrative? I do find that interesting. I find it interesting, too, that we sort of mirror Tom DeLonge with Trump. These guys are loose cannons when it comes to social media, and I'm sure there's a lot of people behind the scenes who are trying to keep them from saying certain things. Will they? Won't they? We don't know. And that's kind of the world we live in now, and that uncertainty is both scary and interesting, especially when it comes to this story.
When it comes to politics also, Ryan, what we're looking at here is, I think, a situation where the variables change when you put in different factors. But of course, the expectation, I believe, probably among the DeLonge camp and others had been that there was going to be the shoe-in for the presidency of Hillary Clinton. And therefore, it would have been a more managed kind of release through government, but one who would have been sympathetic to the UFO calls. Whereas under Trump, like you guys said, it's kind of the bull in the china shop here. And here we have someone who we don't know how he will handle this. He can tend to be so unpredictable that it's very predictable that he will be unpredictable. And therefore, again, if like we were saying, if people start showing up in the White House press briefing room and they're asking Sarah Sanders questions and journalists stay on it, it may lead to a proactive element within government, and yes, maybe even the Trump administration. It's going to be managed far differently from how it would have been had the election resulted differently. And I'll just say this, while Trump hasn't said very much about this, I'm not going to cite an elected official here, but nonetheless someone of interest, I was curious about what Julian Assange would have to say about all of this. From the official WikiLeaks account, there have been 2 tweets which are merely linking back to the Podesta emails that referenced Tom DeLonge and the meeting with Major General William McCaslin of Wright Pat. But from his personal account, Julian Assange just 3 hours ago tweeted, "The New York Times fake news apocalypse has reached perfection with a front page story claiming UFOs exist. No surprise to see CIA, parapsychology, Scientology frauds like Hal Puthoff involved and the most basic journalistic questions unasked."
Well, that's a question for you. Is this and I was kind of getting to that. Is this the CIA? Now, I know that some of us have listened to No Agenda, for example, that podcast that's out there with John C. Dvorak and Adam Curry. They do a great job. It's very out there, some of the stuff. But is this story a CIA plant?
Well, Assange seems to think so.
Yeah.
It's been the criticism and wonderment of Tom DeLonge all along, right? So, yeah.
Clayton, I think you brought up a good point. Clayton brought up a good point earlier in terms of the UFO community. Now, I know this is very minuscule in terms of the overall perception of this story and this phenomenon, but I think it's interesting that we spend so much time in the UFO field saying how much we do not trust the government, how much we do not trust the military when it comes to this topic. This story hits us with all government and, military people involved. And a lot of the community was immediately going to, boom, disclosure. We got it. I believe him. So that trepidation is no longer there with this one story. I find that very intriguing. It's more of a sociological thing than anything. So very interesting in terms of that.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Micah.
Well, I'll just say in this era of fake news, and we're talking about sociological phenomena a lot during this, because fundamentally I think that it's really the lens of human perception that we end up with at the end of the day. It's rather remarkable to me that we've got guys like Assange, and maybe there's some good that he does. Then again, there's some concerns about some of his sympathies politically and otherwise. But when we have someone like Assange, who is, I think, fair to say, so conspiratorial in his thinking that the idea that the New York Times releases information about UFOs is a nonsense story, and that the actual conspiracy is that the CIA is behind all of this and the control of all of it. I mean, it's incredible sometimes the thought that's put to all this. It makes you really kind of, I don't know, it really kind of makes me wonder, my brain's sort of simmering there thinking, what really is the truth? At this point, there's so many variables, it's hard to tell. Yeah. But it's like we're seeing layers of conspiracy thinking on top of conspiracy thinking about all this. At what point can we say safely that taking things at face value, we are talking about an actual phenomena, i.e. UFOs, and not a cover-up within a cover-up within a conspiracy within another cover-up or conspiracy?
Yeah, it kind of, it's like watching an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
So what,
Right.
as we close out here, guys, what should we watch for in 2018? What should we be looking for in the media and so forth?
Well, more videos. We're going to see more. We're going to see more of these gun cannon videos, and I'm excited about that. And that's going to be harder for Julian Assange to come out and say this is all, this is all fake news. You're going to have pilots who are highly credible coming forward, and many of them already have and saying, "Yep, me too." To Micah's point, me too. And there's going to be footage. And it's going to be incredibly hard for all of that to have been faked by someone in a control room somewhere. So I'm excited to see more of that. We're in a visual medium, and people don't read a lot. So, and it's very hard for us to remember given the deluge of news. But to see these videos coming across your Facebook news feed on a regular basis, I think buckle up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll just sort of piggyback off that and say, I think in 2018, we are going to be looking at more careful journalism. If I could throw fake news literally into the garbage and burn that, I wish I could, guys. I still have trust in a lot of these news outlets again, they sat on this story for a while to vet people. That's very important to remember. I do not agree with Assange that this was fake news. I think these people were very careful, these three writers of this article, before they brought this to the public. So I'm actually excited about what articles are going to come out, hopefully accompanied by videos, because like you said, Clayton, we do live in a visual age. I think we're going to get some really interesting stuff, no matter what you think of DeLong or Trump or Assange or the New York Times. I'm very excited to see whatever comes out about this. Hesitantly, yes, but very excited nonetheless.
Micah?
Yeah, we have to kind of be careful in who we put all of our trust in. Whether it's government officials, elected officials, people who claim to be the whistleblowers who are telling the real truth, people who have a background in media who are saying, I have no jurisdiction or background in government, and therefore I can be trusted because I want to work for the people. I mean, everybody has a certain bias. Everyone has a certain motivation. And as Nietzsche said, there are no such things as facts, only opinions. I think, yeah, sure, there are truths that can be universal, but especially when we deal with the political angles of all this, what we need to watch out for in 2018 are the biases, preconceptions, and other influences that are very ego-driven and human in nature, which may color the discussion. We need to be very careful. We need to be very collected in our approach. Measured skepticism must be called for, and we need to look for what things evidence can support before we go citing this is a conspiracy theory, this was a CIA operation, aliens from Zeta 2 Reticuli, whatever. What does the evidence say? What can be supported by facts? That is where the good skepticism comes in, not making fun of the idea that UFOs exist. It's pretty clear at very least right now that we probably have more tangible evidence and at very least a decent discussion by the mainstream media about this that is beginning. It's only beginning. So as we move forward into 2018, I hope that we will have, apart from just good evidence maybe, as released through government videos, maybe some physical proof and some things that would satisfy the physicists, the chemists, the scientific community out there, and hopefully maybe the attitudes among the scientific community, the astronomers, the physicists. I hope maybe they will look at this and they will stop poo-pooing it and playing down the idea that there could be something so far out as an unidentified technology in our midst. Maybe it is time that we can move forward and have that debate. I hope, at very least, if nothing else, that 2018 will bring the beginning of that.
Well, I'll tell you, we've gotten off to a great start with this roundtable. I think this is my favorite show of the whole year, guys, so I appreciate you. And I'll just go around the horn and tell everybody where they can follow up for more info on the various things you do. I know that, Clayton, you are on to a very exciting part of your life and your endeavor now, helping people grow their wealth and the security of their families. Tell folks what you're up to and where they can find you.
Yeah, so my wife and I started a company a couple of years ago around turnkey real estate investing. It's called Morris, just my last name, morrisinvest.com. And my wife and I have really made it our mission for 2018 to serve as much as we can to help those people. There's such a lack of financial education in this country, and really trying to help people break that cycle and teach them about the power of passive income and spending more time with their family and how to do it. And how to do it is not follow the government's, not follow the way that we were taught in elementary and middle school, and we're not taught about financial education. So we teach you how to work with the way the government wants you to grow, which is be an entrepreneur and start your own company and to grow and build passive income. So that's what we do. So yeah, you can find me over there. I'm happy to talk to any of this audience, and hopefully there's people in this audience that really care about that too. So.
Well, it's been a privilege to talk to you today on this subject, and folks, do check that out. Now, Micah Hanks, one of the favorite parts of my year was I actually got to see Micah in the flesh. It only happens, it seems like, every couple of years, but we spent some time together on the Mysteries Cruise, and it was a hoot. And Micah, as always, tell people where they can find the Gralien Report and everything you do, because it's good stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. It was equally enjoyable and my privilege to spend time with you. And also that goes for the other two panelists here. Ryan, I got to hang out with you in Nova Scotia some this year. Clayton, I'm still hoping one day you and I get to sit down and have a drink and catch up, buddy. And we got to stay in touch more often. And truly best luck with your new endeavor, because as podcasters, I think the other three of us know that, that smart passive income is such an important thing. That's why I wrote a book about podcasting, The Maverick Guide to Podcasting. And of course, you can learn about everything that I do, that book, the podcasts I do, and everything at micahhanks.com. That's my primary website. And then also my podcast that relates the most to this subject, of course, is gralienreport.com. But you might also check out, because we did get into some of the government angle of this on the Middle Theory podcast this week. I'll be uploading that show later today, and that's middletheory.com, which is news and current events, without so much of the unexplained that my other interests take shape with. So lots to look forward to in 2018, and I'll be making some big announcements on the podcast about a new project coming up in the next few weeks, but that's where people can find out about me. And do follow me on Twitter at Micah Hanks also.
Excellent. And Ryan Sprague, podcaster, writer, and up-and-coming UFO researcher. Ryan, tell folks where they can find everything you do.
Absolutely. Again, Micah's book was a godsend. It saved my life. Check out Maverick Podcasting. Clayton, you've been a longtime friend and colleague. I am so honored to have done this with all three of you. My podcast, Somewhere in the Skies, can now be found at the E1 Entertainment Podcast Network. Very excited about that. All my articles, my work, everything can be found at somewhereintheskies.com.
And to all of you listening, we thank you and hope that you have a happy and healthy holiday season and the best 2018 ever. We will be back next week with a show on astrology, of all things, astrology for 2018 and what the stars have in store. And we hope they're only good things. And maybe there's some UFOs up there, too. We thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time on the Paranormal Podcast. Merry Christmas, everybody. Bye. Now for the legal disclaimer. We do not accept money from publishers or content producers in exchange for interviews. However, as with most media outlets, in the majority of cases, we do receive complimentary copies of books and DVDs that we feature on our podcasts. Your purchases of books, DVDs, and other items via our Amazon.com links benefit Jim Harold and JimHarold.com and help us continue our programming. The sponsor messages you hear on the programs are paid endorsements, although we really do like them. For the full disclaimer, go to JimHarold.com, and thanks for listening.